All right. Good morning, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. I have 9:30. I have 9:30 on all three electronic devices. So good morning. Welcome to the 2020 Southwest Regional Economic Forecast. My name is Christine Damko, and I am the Economic Development Manager at the City of Temecula. And we appreciate you taking the time this morning to join us. Today's event will include updates from our 5 local city managers and an economic outlook from Dr. Tanner Osman. There'll be a short Q&A session with Dr. Osman after his presentation. If you have a question, please be sure to use the Q&A box located on your Zoom screen, and I'll be watching those throughout the presentation and keeping a log. This event is being recorded and will be available to watch on the Chamber's YouTube channel. Please join me as we take this opportunity to thank the businesses who have sponsored this year's 2020 Southwest Regional Economic Forecast. Thank you to our title sponsors, Loma Linda University Medical Center, Murrieta, and Southwest Riverside County Association of Realtors. Our speaker sponsor is Southwest Healthcare System. Our breakfast sponsors are Abbott, Southern California Edison, and Temecula Valley Hospital. Our corporate sponsors are Eastern Municipal Water District, the law offices of Rosenstein and Associates, Paradise Chevrolet Cadillac, and Promenade Temecula. Our corporate sponsors are the City of Temecula and Pechanga Resort and Casino. And our media sponsor is the Valley News. We will now receive economic updates from our city managers. The first presentation will be from Grant Yates, City Manager of the City of Lake Elsinore.
Hello, everyone. I'm Grant Yates with the City of Lake Elsinore. It's our pleasure to be here today. I know it's a little bit challenging with the pandemic raging through our community, but we definitely want to thank the Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event and trying to keep things as normal as possible. So in the City of Lake Elsinore, we've had a great year. First of all, we are excited about one of our bigger projects that we've ever undertaken. We finally got to the point where we're doing construction on the Railroad Canyon Diamond Drive Interchange project. That project is going to not only help our community immensely, but the whole region. 2 other projects that I'd like to mention that are of significance. First, we're very excited on how the initial election results have been trending for our sales tax initiative, Measure Z, and we're the last community in Southwest Riverside County to basically ask our citizens if they'd like to enact that tax. And as we sit here today, we're over 60% in the positive. And this measure will provide over $10 million of funding for our community, which will allow us to move forward and really become the community that we all believe we can be. The final project I wanted to mention is we completed our first strategic plan for the city. And so we're really excited about our Dream Extreme 2040 plan. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later this morning too. But these are just a couple of examples of amazing projects that are happening here in Lake Elsinore. To give you a sense of the progress we've made in Lake Elsinore over the last 4 years, please take a look at this video. As you can see, we've been very busy here in Lake Elsinore welcoming new investment. With our city at 30% built out, we have endless opportunities here in Lake Elsinore going forward. Looking ahead, the City Council adopted our first 2040 plan. This plan creates a framework for all decision-making as we move forward over the next several decades in our community. It also provides a guide and assists others as they're looking at investing and doing business with our community. We have a short 1-minute video we'd like to share with you that gives you more information about the Dream Extreme 2040 plan. We urge all of you to take a look at our Dream Extreme 2040 plan, which is located on the city's website. Again, thank you to the Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event, and thank you to all of our partners out there who have been part of our success here in the city of Lake Elsinore.
Thanks for the great presentation, Grant, and you guys have been busy. Great job. So next we'll have an update from Armando Villa. He is the city manager of the city of Menifee.
As the fastest growing city in Southwest Riverside County and the 5th fastest in Southern California, Menifee is now set to surpass 100,000 people in the next year, making us a nationally recognized boomtown. We are also recognized as one of the top 100 cities in the nation to raise kids, a top 2 place to live in the Inland Empire, one of the top 35 safest cities in California, and a top 10 city in the nation as a place to celebrate Halloween because of our safety, family-friendly city, and shopping. Through the concerted efforts and policies of our city council, city staff, and leadership, we continue to invest in our legacy as a city by ensuring Menifee is a safe, thriving, and premier place to be. In 2018, the City Council addressed rising public safety costs with the formation of the Menifee Municipal Police Department, which entered service on July 1st, 2020, with 60 officers and 17 professional staff. This was not an easy undertaking, but has proven to be very beneficial, saving us close to $5 million annually while increasing our total patrol hours.
For dispatch services, we partner with Rosetta, and together we have saved costs while providing exceptional service to both cities.
Chief Walsh and his leadership team have been busy, and over the past 18 months, they renovated the old City Hall and brought us a world-class police department with a fleet of vehicles, the latest technology, the best equipment. Their humble yet creative approach to community policing has already gained them the trust, compassion, and support of our community. That is just one of many reasons I am very proud of our team and Chief Walsh.
Together, the Menifee Police Department is working hard to provide an experience where everybody feels unified, engaged, and safe.
A safe city does not just mean public safety, but also safe roadways.
Our graffiti removal team is keeping Menifee clean by removing graffiti in 48 hours or less. And our pothole strike team is hard at work, filling potholes and making commutes smoother. We also invested in our pavement management program to efficiently repair Menifee roads, keeping the city moving.
Menifee is thriving, and that starts from the inside out. Internally, we work together as a team, and it shows. The city of Menifee recently made the Inland Empire's top workplaces list for the third year in a row, which is an anonymous survey of staff about teamwork, workplace culture, and leadership.
From 2008 to today, the city has experienced a 71% growth change in population and has over 155 projects in the works by private developers and stakeholders.
Currently, we have over 34 residential tracts under construction and 28 new commercial projects in the pipeline. Even during COVID-19, we have seen strong development activity, including construction on Menifee Plaza, the RV Supercenter, Getz Plaza, McCall Square, Menifee Public Library, Center Point Plaza, WellQuest, and the MSJC Stadium and expansion.
A lot is happening. Right now, we have 640,000 square feet of commercial space in plan review, 633,000 square feet of commercial projects in construction, and 1.3 million square feet of industrial property being processed. The Mid-County Courthouse, a 9-courtroom civil and family law courthouse, is a $90 million investment that is moving forward at top speed. It has been fully funded, and plans to break ground are set for spring 2021.
We also recently completed the monumental Scott Road interchange, which was a part of the city's $181 million capital improvement program.
Through the effects of the pandemic, we continue to push forward at full speed. Ready to meet the challenge, our team went into action and changed our City Hall one-stop shop into a no-stop shop. Our development team guided the city and invested in customer service by rolling out a new online virtual front counter, a virtual permit center, and a concierge customer service system that allows residents and customers to conduct business from the ease of their home or office. They also introduced a new flat fee structure, a new development code, and enhanced technology, decreasing processing times. And we aren't stopping there. We are investing in the future to ensure we thrive as a community and become a premier place to be. This year, we completed our comprehensive economic development strategy, the first in all of Southwest Riverside County, to ensure diversity in our local economy. We also received council directions to start a smart city strategy, are finishing our new active transportation plan, updating our housing element, and are making great progress with our Parks Master Plan.
In the last year, pre-COVID-19, Menifee went from 14 special events in the city to 40, adding programming and classes for all ages, including award-winning events such as the Music and Arts Festival and our annual Independence Day celebration.
These milestone accomplishments for the city are all aimed at making Menifee the new, better, best city it can be for our employees, our businesses, and our residents. Our city council and staff have worked hard to increase the quality of life for our residents and businesses. We may only be 12 years old, but one thing is clear: the leadership and vision that we have in the city are well established.
While we are always thinking of the future, I'm proud to say that Menifee is already seen as a safe, thriving, and premier place to be.
Thanks, Armando. And a nationally recognized boomtown. That's pretty cool. I love it. Please welcome our next presentation by Kim Summers, the City Manager for the City of Murrieta.
Good morning. I'm Kim Summers, City Manager for the City of Murrieta, and I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in this morning to watch all of our city presentations. We truly do appreciate it. So 2020, what a year, right? If we tried our hardest, we could not have imagined this past year. And I think it's important to first acknowledge that there's not one of us that hasn't been touched by everything that's been going on in the last 9 months. And many of us have struggled or faced loss. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that. However, this morning, we want to share with you some of the accomplishments of the City of Murrieta, and there are many. Even though our doors have been closed, our staff has been busy at City Hall working away to keep all of our projects online. And we've been working hard to support our many businesses, many who are struggling to come up with ways to keep them in business, as well as coming up with some innovative and creative ways to bring city services to our citizens and to keep everything moving forward, keep all of our projects going forward. And we also did it while balancing the budget and keeping our reserves strong. So I invite you to sit back, relax a little bit. We're going to take a whirlwind trip through some of our accomplishments from the last year, and we will see you at the end. Thank you. We've had exciting growth, as you can see, yet we can't talk about our local economy without mentioning our strong public safety team. Murrieta has the second lowest violent crime rate in the nation. It's a very desirable place to live and work. That's in large part due to our community-based police and fire departments, men and women, many of whom grew up here, who understand local needs and connect with those they serve. We are also fortunate to have an engaged community that passed Measure T in 2019. Many of the deferred improvements that this 1 cent sales tax made possible are now taking shape. Measure T has also helped us weather the financial impact of COVID due to lost tax revenue. While we are freezing many new hires, our services to the community remain strong. Prudent fiscal planning, grant funding, and leveraged resources have enabled us to move forward with some key city projects this year. Our long-awaited amphitheater, which, believe it or not, is funded with redevelopment dollars, will anchor our downtown core and offer a regional entertainment venue. Our Slurry Sill project resurfaced 50% of our residential streets, improving the look and longevity of those streets and kicking off a 2-year resurfacing cycle. The city's newest park, B Street Station, marks a continued emphasis on top quality parks and recreation programs, another major draw for residents and businesses. Grant funded with a focus on older adult health, B Street is now open for exercising, pickleball, and more. They say necessity is the mother of invention, and the past year has inspired us to build processes that support safe, high quality, low contact service. Is our highly successful drive-through vote by mail center. In partnership with the County Registrars of Voters, we served 16,500 voters with quick, easy, and safe ballot drops at City Hall. Building and construction have been going strong in 2020, with city and commercial projects like the ones we highlighted earlier, and even residential housing. When safety measures forced us to close our doors, staff quickly developed a safe, easy outdoor plan drop system, and we integrated a digital plan check program, allowing development to progress without delays. Our virtual City Hall expanded quickly to allow the library, Parks and Recreation, Public Safety, and City Hall the ability to provide services and stay connected with citizens. To say local businesses have had a hard year would be a huge understatement, but staff has worked hard to help them navigate ever-changing COVID requirements. One example is our outdoor dining program that supports no permit, no fee use of parking areas for business operations. Hopefully, many of you have visited one of our safer yet charming venues. For residents, it provides a safer way to dine out, and for restaurants, it can mean the difference between staying open and closing their doors. Our Back to Business team connects businesses to programs like this and offers daily updates to the business community, links to resources, one-on-one support, and so much more. We also put our money where our mouth is. Earlier this year, the City Council reprogrammed $250,000 in CDBG funds for grants for small businesses impacted by COVID. Last month, we began phase 2 of this exciting program that will support up to 25 Murrieta businesses. A community is more than public safety and economic development. Special events bring residents together. Libraries connect and inspire us. Our Parks and Rec team got creative with new types of events, and our libraries serve tens of thousands with virtual programming, keeping our community engaged and connected even during COVID. So as you can see, despite numerous challenges, the City of Murrieta has been going forward strong, and we couldn't have done it without all of our partners, our neighboring cities, our City Council, our businesses, our nonprofits, all of our citizens, and of course, our strong city staff. I think that as you've watched this video, you will understand why we are so proud of the City of Murrieta and how the past year has really helped us to become an extremely resilient community. Thank you, and I hope when I see you next year, it will be in person.
Thanks, Kim. And I am personally looking forward to the opening of your floor and decor store. I've heard a lot of good things about that store. So now welcome an update from Aaron Adams, City Manager for the City of Temecula.
Hello, my name is Aaron Adams, and I have the privilege of being the city manager for the city of Temecula. What a year it has been. From an economic perspective, especially March through June in particular, the city of Temecula has experienced a roller coaster of steep dips, unexpected sharp turns, and most recently, a steady climb upwards. I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you about Temecula's current economic situation and how COVID-19 has affected it. And then also share with you some development projects happening around town. One of the most common questions or comments that we have been getting lately is people asking us how many businesses have closed due to COVID-19. Yes, there is no doubt COVID-19 has negatively affected all economies from the national to the state and to the local level. And indeed, Temecula has felt the impacts. But at least here in Temecula, it is not as horrific as one might think. Temecula overall is remaining strong and healthy and is primed for continued investment opportunities and business growth. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Southern California Edison has produced data comparing the number of new electricity service meters versus the number of closed meters for commercial accounts in Riverside County, comparing 2019 to 2020. As you can see, even with COVID-19, 2020 is still looking better than last year. More active accounts and less closed accounts. Check this real estate news out. Temecula's Raising Cane's property just sold at $1,728 a square foot, the highest price ever paid on a national basis for a Raising Cane's property. If this doesn't prove that Temecula isn't a strong market, I don't know what else does. Oh, and by the way, you can still get your chicken at Raising Cane's. They're not going anywhere, just the property sold. Let me move on to the next portion of my presentation and talk about our new development. You know what? I'm sick and tired of these Zoom meetings. Let me take you around town and show you firsthand what's really going on in the development world in the city of Temecula. If you haven't been to Old Town recently, this is the place to be. Due to the impacts of COVID, the city has permitted restaurants and retailers to expand their operations outside, which has created this energy full of excitement on the streets of Old Town. We have also seen new development projects submitted, such as proposed multi-story commercial building on Front Street to replace the former root beer shop. New business also continues to come here, such as Bottega Italia, an authentic Italian restaurant and bakery. Small Barn, a chic, modern farmhouse outdoor restaurant. Coming soon, a pizza and ping pong entertainment space called Pop Spin, and Old Town's newest deli, Happy Belly Deli. You know what? All this talking about food is making me hungry. I'll be right back. Wow, this looks amazing. This sandwich has changed my life. It is absolutely fantastic. You gotta try it. Welcome to the city's future urban development core, Uptown Temecula, AKA Jefferson Avenue. This part of town may look unassuming now, but the city has laid a strong development foundation that allows private investment to come in, be creative, and redevelop. Currently, there are applications in for 3 hotels, which includes Hilton Garden Inn, Homewood Suites, and Staybridge Suites, all located in Uptown Temecula. The city also approved its first residential housing project, 77 high-density units called Las Haciendas. You guessed it, on Las Haciendas Street, near the creek off Jefferson Avenue. Uptown Temecula is also home to some of our award-winning breweries and meaderies. By the way, a few of them won medals at the most recent San Diego Craft Brew Awards, putting Temecula on the map. Okay, I can't talk about Temecula's economic development without mentioning our hot housing market. In fact, just last month, Temecula's average real estate sale was over $540,000, which is 3.6% over this time last year. But now, I'm here at Somers Bend, Temecula's newest planned community located on the northeast part of town. The development will also construct the city's 3rd sports park, which will consist of 20 acres of basketball, baseball, and soccer facilities and will be open to the public. I'm at my last stop, Temecula Valley Toyota. Very excited to be reviewing their plans, soon to be grading on a 54,000 square foot state-of-the-art Lexus facility. By the way, did you know that the Temecula auto dealers account for 27% of our sales tax revenue? They are a vital contributor to the Temecula economy. And on the subject of cars, Tesla Motors has recently submitted an application for a service and sales facility located on the west side of town on Rancho Way near the DMV. We look forward to working with Tesla and welcoming them to the community. And just down the road on Yanez, next to the Temecula Duck Pond, the city recently approved 270 multifamily units, including many affordable housing units, and this property is part of the Rancho Highlands planned community. As you can see, there are lots of exciting things happening in the city of Temecula, and our market remains strong. I hope you enjoyed this quick tour. Hey, Tom, would it be okay if I take this new Lexus for a spin?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll be back. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. And yes, the tractors are out there right now. Lexus is currently grading. So last but not least, we have an update from Gary Nordquist. He's a city manager of the city of Wildomar.
Wildomar is located in Southern California along the newly expanded I-15 freeway and is nestled in beautiful, growing southwest Riverside County. As the gateway to the Santa Rosa Plateau and in close proximity to a bustling wine country, the West Coast's largest Indian gaming casino, and home to the region's only trauma center, we are well positioned for our 37,000 residents. One of our gems is our commercial corridor, known as the Miracle Mile. This stretch of eclectic restaurants and retail on Clinton Keith Road is perfectly positioned for the folks up the hill in Tinaja and La Cresta to join their Wildomar friends for a craft cocktail, excellent gastropub eats, and live entertainment. One very important aspect of our Miracle Mile is that it is filled with mostly mom and pop businesses, such as The Hive, Stadium Pizza, Tracino's, Pie Nation, Angelo's, Tuscany Grill, Teakwoods, and many, many others. In fact, The Barn, which features Finch, City Local, and an array of other small businesses, is almost entirely comprised of mom and pop establishments, something Wildomar is very proud of and supports. Our most prominent thoroughfare, Clinton Keith Road, is considered a super commercial highway that stretches approximately 20 miles from the multi-million-dollar homes in Tinaja all the way out to French Valley. A retailer's dream to be located along this stretch of highway because it provides ease of access for multiple trade areas. And the great news is Wildomar has land available along that corridor for those retailers, hoteliers, and offices to move right in. And a drive through beautiful Wildomar would not be complete without stopping at DeYoung's Dairy for our world-famous chocolate milk. Just ask our mayor.
Man, that's good chocolate milk.
When we became a city in 2008, the creation of city parks and an ever-increasing quality of life were among the most important aspects of achieving cityhood. Today, Wildomar has 4 parks and just over 10 annual events where residents, friends, and family enjoy the beautiful California weather and share a sense of community. Wildomar's signature event, the Rooted in Nature Craft Brew Festival, is an excellent way to meet your neighbors, try out a new microbrew, and support the Santa Rosa Plateau Nature Education Foundation. Thanks to a sales tax measure that residents approved in 2018, Wildomar recently added a traffic control officer as well as a medic squad. Both are welcome additions for the valued safety of Wildomar's residents. Certainly, the recent pandemic had been a challenge that everyone is trying to navigate. But at the city of Wildomar, it has been business as usual. Even with the pandemic shutdown, we have been very focused on the health and safety of our council, staff, residents, and businesses. So the City Hall building has been closed to the public for the better part of the year. But that does not mean that we have slowed down. In fact, quite the opposite. We are working on a 35,000 square foot shooting range that will be under construction soon, along with much needed and long awaited improvements on Bundy Canyon Road. The construction will provide for about a mile of 4 continuous lanes, starting just east of the I-15 freeway, and the installation of 2 traffic signals. What a prime location for commercial development. Also this year, we took one street that had 5 different names and consolidated it into one name, Wildomar Trail. Piggybacking on sign replacements Caltrans already scheduled for this year really saved us a lot of money by timing this name change just right. A special thanks to Caltrans. The pandemic did not stop new businesses from coming to Wildomar this year either. We are excited to welcome quite a few new businesses to our city and have been pleased to see some businesses expanding as well. For the first time in our cityhood, we are in the process of approving high-end cannabis retail dispensaries into certain areas of the city. It is important to note that Southwest Riverside County is an oasis that simply does not exist in other parts of this state. The 6 cities in our region work very closely together, and Wildemar is committed to being a good neighbor. So we purposely seek out developments and opportunities that will complement the region and not compete with what is already here. We are honored to be a part of the strong collaboration here in our beautiful corner of this county. Wildemar offers an incredible quality of life. Great schools, new homes, improved public safety, eateries, entertainment, and beautiful parks, all in a rural atmosphere. And this growing community still has a lot of room to grow. Wildemar, tradition, opportunity, and progress. If you don't call Wildemar home for your residence or business, you should probably ask yourself why. Because you know now that we are en route for positive growth.
Thank you to the city of Wildemar. And so that concludes our city manager portion of the presentation. Just wanted to thank all the cities for putting together these updates. We are so fortunate to live in an area with dedicated and hardworking leaders. So up next, it is my pleasure to welcome our keynote presenter. Tanner Osmond is a manager of regional and sub-regional analysis at the UC Riverside School of Business Center for Economic Forecasting and Development. Dr. Osmond plays a leading role in many of the center's principal research projects, which currently include developing labor market analysis and industry profiles for a variety of regional economies. He holds a PhD in urban planning from UCLA with a specialization in regional and international development. Please welcome Dr. Tanner Osmond.
Well, thank you very much. It's very good to be here. Although my accent will not tell you this, I actually do have an association with the Southwest region of Riverside County. My wife actually grew up in Marietta and I got married in Temecula, so I'm no stranger to that lovely part of the state. Today, I'm going to share some thoughts with you about how the economy is doing. And in an ideal world, I'd focus exclusively on the Southwest region of Riverside County, but unfortunately, the smaller the level of the geographic units that we examine, the less reliable, or not the less reliable, the less good, and the less comprehensive the data is. And I think now, as much as any time, it's very difficult to study economies in isolation. The macroeconomic picture is always important, but I think if you look at what is driving the economic fallout that we're currently experiencing, this is very much being driven by macro rather than local trends. So I'm going to divide my talk up into 4 primary pieces. I'm going to briefly cover the US and California economy. The US economy, with respect to the US economy, the good news is we are recovering from the depths of the recession that we experienced in April, although that recovery is slowing. In California, and a recovery is underway as well, but in California, the economy hasn't fared quite as well as it has in the rest of the US. I'm then going to drill down into the Inland Empire and then the Southwest region. And with respect to the Inland Empire, the economy has performed better than in the rest of the state, which is certainly some good news. And I think that there's reason for optimism as being displayed by the previous presenters with respect to the Southwest region of Riverside County. And I think the sort of overarching theme from my talk and my presentation is that we've come a long way since April, but there is still quite a long way to go until we're out of the woods just here. Now, right now, everything with respect to the economy is being dominated by what is happening with respect to the coronavirus. And as anybody who's been following the news will see, we have had a dramatic surge in cases over the last 2 to 4 weeks. And we are now, it seems, recording a new high on a nearly daily basis. The 7-day moving average of cases is increasing on a daily basis. The bright spot is right now that the deaths or the rate of deaths aren't where they were in March and April when we were grappling with how to treat the coronavirus. So the sort of good news, if there is any to be found in the spreading of the virus, is that it's not going to have quite as devastating effect as it did for the people who contracted the virus earlier this year. That being said, it is still clearly wreaking a lot of, causing a lot of damage, and it is, you know, clearly an ever-present public health crisis. And with respect to the increase in cases has also been coupled by increase in hospitalization. And the significance of this is that for as long as the virus is spreading, it acts as a headwind for the economy. Just yesterday, there were a whole raft of new measures that were put in place around the United States to contain the spread of the virus. As many of you will have seen, California in particular, we entered a new sort of passage in our, or a new phase with respect to the state's efforts to contain the virus. And all these restrictions do stymie consumer activity. So in addition to the sort of public health crisis, these efforts to try and contain and solve this public health crisis is creating a drag on the economic recovery. And if we were to look at where the virus is breaking out right now, it is especially pronounced in the Midwest, although California itself yesterday recorded the highest number of new cases on record. So we certainly are not immune from what is gripping the rest of the nation right now. With respect to the US economy, in April, we saw the largest number of jobs lost ever recorded in a month in the US economy. And the good news is that since this time, we have seen a recovery of around about 50%. So a hair over 22 million jobs were lost. And right now, we're still, with respect to the US economy, have a deficit of 10 million jobs compared to where we were in February. So employment is still down around about 7% nationally compared to where it was prior to the pandemic. And of course, some sectors have been hit harder than others, in particular, the leisure and hospitality sector, which covers accommodation, restaurants and food services, has driven around about 35% of the job losses that have occurred nationally. Other major job losses have been seen in absolute terms in education and professional services. And one of the sort of less encouraging trends of the recovery has been the extent to which the snapback in the job market has begun to slow. So over the 2 months of March and April, as I mentioned, we saw around about 22 million jobs lost. We saw a pretty impressive snapback in June and May, when around about 8 million of these jobs, 7.5, 8 million of these jobs were recovered. But each subsequent month since then, the rate of job growth has slowed. And the expectation is that in November, given what is happening around the state with respect to the virus, that this trend will continue. So we're adding jobs back to the economy at a much slower rate than we were in the summertime. The good news is that the unemployment rate has been dropping nationally. So we're hovering around about 7% right now, which is one of the encouraging signs of the recovery that we're seeing, because of course nobody wants an unemployment rate in the mid-teens. Now, one of the striking features of the damage that has been sustained in the labor market is the extent to which it has affected different income groups. So what we see is that if we look at those workers nationally who earn more than $60,000 a year, they've actually seen job growth compared to where jobs stood in January. As we move down the income spectrum, we see that nationally around about 5% of the sort of what we might call middle wage jobs, those earning between $27,000 and $60,000 a year, we see 5% fewer jobs than we did in January. But if we look at this sort of lowest income threshold, we see that 1 in 5 jobs for those people earning $27,000 a year nationally has been lost. So this is an economic fallout which has disproportionately affected lower income people and also people of color. So that's where we stand with respect to the labor market. With respect to where GDP and output stands, in the first quarter of this year, the economy contracted by 5%, followed by 31% contraction in Q2, which was the largest ever economic contraction on record. But in Q3, we saw the largest growth in output that has ever been recorded. And where we stand today is that output is around about 4% lower than where it was prior to the pandemic. So we have recovered a lot of the output that was lost, although we are still behind where we stood before the pandemic, and we are considerably behind trend as well. And one thing that's important to note with respect to output, that a lot of this has been driven by consumer activity. So of that contraction of 31% in GDP, 24 of these points were driven by consumer activity. And if you sort of were to scroll down the table and look at where that damage has been, or where that fallout has been for the consumer, it has been in the services. So consumers' inability to consume services was a very big drag on the economy in Q2. And of course, services have been the most affected sector of the economy because of the fallout or the restrictions with respect to indoor dining and in-personal services. If you look at sort of consumption in a little bit closer detail, again, this is, whereas the chart on the left represents output, the chart on the right is representing consumer, so it's breaking out the sort of segment of the chart here. Again, we saw a very similar story where consumption contracted, and we saw a big bounce back in Q3. And just to sort of pan out, this was the damage that was done with respect to consumption as a result of the outbreak of the pandemic earlier this year. We see this enormous drop in with respect to consumption, which has recovered, but again, we're not quite where we were with respect to consumption prior to the pandemic. And the chart on the right just tells you, shows you again that that damage has really been concentrated in the services sector. So the blue line represents total personal consumption. The green line represents services. So services is what is preventing consumption from returning to where it was prior to the pandemic. With respect to the housing market, there's been some really encouraging news as we've headed into the summer. So despite the contraction of sales, home sales that occurred in April and May, we've seen a pretty phenomenal recovery in August and September. And as home sales have continued, we've also seen an increase in housing prices as well. And I don't think too many people were forecasting that early this year. But the strength of the housing market, I think, has been primarily driven by three factors. The first is that we just had a lot of pent-up demand. The suppression of activity in April and May has led to this big sort of snapback with respect to the housing market. But we have all-time low interest rates, and lower interest rates are bullish for housing activity. A third thing that is really driving the housing market is the fact that this economic fallout has disproportionately affected lower income workers. And lower income workers typically are not the workers who are driving the housing market. So if you were to think back to that slide where I showed you that the highest income workers have actually been relatively unscathed with respect to job losses, these are the households which are typically driving house market consumption. The fact that the economy hasn't affected the higher income households so much is bullish for the housing market. With respect to where the US economy is heading, inevitably all roads are leading to the coronavirus. This was not a structural recession. This was not a recession which was driven by debt incurred by consumers. This was not a recession that was incurred by unwise decision made by banks. This was a recession which was grounded in this global pandemic. A lot of the recovery, a lot of the strength that we've seen to this point, especially with respect to the consumer, has been driven by Congress with respect to stimulus payments and enhanced unemployment benefits. And over time, as these stimulus measures have worn off, what we've seen is the economic recovery slow. So open question as we head into 2021 is the extent to which Congress is going to act again. And your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea what Congress is going to do from one day to the next. But of course, if we were able to pass a stimulus package, that would provide much needed assistance, particularly for low income workers. With respect to the labor market, despite the snapback in the labor market we have seen, there is a lot of damage has been sustained to the national labor market. We still have more than 10 million fewer jobs than we did in February of this year. And if you were to look at the rate at which we added jobs in October, that figure around about 630,000 jobs, if we were to keep adding jobs at that same rate, it would take until 2022 until we return to the level of employment that we had this year in February 2020, and that would just return us to where we were in February 2020. Under normal circumstances, the economy would have been growing over this period. So to return to trend for the labor market, to return to the trend that it was on prior to the pandemic, we cannot expect that to happen too much before 2023. It's not all bad news. There is a lot of encouraging news with respect to the vaccine. We've seen a couple of really encouraging headlines this week, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but most epidemiologists think that the worst will be behind us at the end of this winter with respect to the virus, and I continue to hope and keep my fingers crossed that that is the case. And again, with respect to the economy, because this was a recession which was not driven by structural problems, we should be able to snap back to normalcy relatively quickly. If the pandemic ended tomorrow, we do not have a lot of sort of excess debt that needs to be burnt off in order for the economy to mend and to repair, as was the case with the Great Recession. A lot of what is holding the economy back is the continued spread of the coronavirus. Let's move on briefly to California. California, like the US, has seen an uptick in cases, and many of you will have seen yesterday that Governor Newsom put in place a whole raft of new restrictions. Many counties moved back into purple tier, the purple tier, which is the most restrictive level of business activity. And what we see is that I think it's 41 of 59 counties are now fall into the category of the purple tier. And again, that is a headwind for the California economy. And what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, red being where new cases are rising the quickest, is a lot of parts of the state, a lot of counties are moving from yellow to orange and to red. So we are seeing a pretty quick increase in the spread of coronavirus in California, which again is a headwind for the economy. The losses in jobs that occurred in California in April and May were somewhat consistent with what happened nationally, although the recovery since this time has been less well pronounced in California than it has been in the US. So if you remember from the US chart, employment levels in the US were down 6.6% compared to the pre-pandemic levels, whereas in California, we're still down 9.2%. So the labor market in California has sustained 50% more damage than has been the case nationally. And within the state, we still have 1.6 million fewer jobs today than we had in February this year. Much like the national economy, the sectors which have been hit the hardest include hospitality, which I discussed with respect to the national economy, and other services has been hit particularly hard as well. And other services includes nail salons, beauty salons, gyms, hair salons, and so on and so forth. And a lot of the restraints which have been put in place at the county and the state level has really suppressed activity in this sector. One slightly, or another worrying trend with respect to the California labor market concerns the labor force. And while we saw a snapback in the labor force, so this is the number of people, the labor force measures the number of people who are either working or who are looking for work. And what we see during a time of recession is a number of people become discouraged and leave the market. They stop looking for work. And that is why we saw sort of this cratering of the labor force in California in earlier this year. We did see a positive snapback, but as schools have opened up, what we're seeing in the economy is that in many households, the responsibility for educating and taking care of children has fallen on women. And we've seen a reduction in the labor force as people have had to drop out the labor force with schools returning, but being online to take care of children. With respect to the unemployment rate, again, the unemployment rate in California is much higher than we see nationally. Nationally, the unemployment rate was hovering around 7%. In California, it's still above 10%, which again just demonstrates the extent to which California has been hit harder. And the reason California has been hit harder probably boils down to 4 reasons. The first is that international trade has contracted, and given the complexes, the port and the logistics complexes that we have in California, there has been some fallout with respect to the shrinking of international trade. Tourism is a big driver of the California economy. Disneyland is still closed, Universal Studios is still closed, people are still flying internationally and nationally less than they were, and this is causing a significant drag on tourism in the state. The restrictions in California have been a little bit stricter than they have been in other states. And I think there's also differences in behavior in California that we might see in some other states as well. So perhaps the average Californian is more likely to be a little bit more reticent with respect to resuming normal activity than might be found in other states. And I think if you add all these things together, you can see why California has fared slightly worse or significantly worse, I would say, than the national economy. Again, in California, as we saw at the national level, the employment losses have been concentrated to a greater extent in these sort of lower income workers. So if we were to look at people earning less than $20,000 a year in the state, we've seen a drop in 30% or a fall of 30% in the number of people who are working compared to January in that category of worker who earns less than $27,000 a year. And unlike was the case nationally, where we've actually seen some job growth in the higher wage component of the economy, in California, we've actually seen a contraction there as well. So across the spectrum, across the income spectrum, California has performed worse than the national economy. This shows up as well in consumption. So here we're comparing US consumer activity with California consumer activity. And Californians are spending around about 50% less, or sorry, the contraction, I should say, in consumer spending in California is around about 50% greater than is the case nationally. And this chart on the right just shows you where consumer activity has contracted the most in California. So restaurants and hotels across the state, we've seen a contraction of 41%, which is a remarkable drop compared to prior to the pandemic. Spending on entertainment and recreation has fallen by nearly 2/3. So this is really a big driver of consumption activity in California. And again, this sort of entertainment complex here is really being driven by the closures in many of the sort of theme parks and the contraction in tourism in the state. With respect to California, we have seen a snapback in home sales, as we have seen nationally. And I discussed many of the reasons for why the housing market has fared well. But if you sort of look across different regions in the US, within California, we do see that on a year-over-year basis, we have seen pretty strong growth in in home sales. So this is home sales. So this is a really strong point of the California economy right now. What has been doing relatively less well has been the California rental market. So if you look at apartment rents on a year-over-year basis in California, they're down around about 3%. And there are a variety of explanations for that. But what we have seen, as many of you may have seen in the media, is somewhat of a, perhaps exodus is a too strong a word, but we have seen people moving out of high-cost places as they've been working for home. This is certainly the case in the Bay Area. This is certainly the case in LA. And as people have vacated apartments, this has put downward pressure. On prices. With respect to the outlook in California, is very similar to the outlook in the US. We cannot mend the economy while the virus is surging. So the biggest threat to the economy is the continued spread of the coronavirus. Much like the US economy, which we can't expect a full recovery of until 2023, we can expect California to be on a trajectory, on a similar trajectory. While California's labor market performance has lagged the US, we would expect as we move into 2021 that there will be a stronger growth in California relative to the national economy. And again, the positive news is that as we continue to, as hopefully as sort of vaccines come to market, we will, start to see the economy pick up as we move into the spring. Okay, I'm now going to drill down into the Inland Empire and the Southwest regions of Riverside County. And the pandemic didn't come has taken us all by surprise and knocked us all off of our feet. But one of the things that but it's been especially disruptive for the Inland Empire because the Inland Empire was on a great growth trajectory. So since the Great Recession, the Inland Empire has been one of the strongest growing parts of the state. And if you were to look at sort of 2019 employment growth, the Inland Empire was outgrowing the state's economy in terms of jobs added by twofold. So the job growth in the Inland Empire was twice the job growth that we saw in the state of California. So yeah, this has disrupted the pandemic beyond the sort of public health sort of devastation that has been, which has occurred. It has also been incredibly disruptive to an economy in the Inland Empire, which was all guns blazing prior to the pandemic. And with the Inland Empire, we see a similar picture to what we observed in the US and California. We saw this snapback, we saw this contraction of the labor market in April and May. And we've seen a snapback which has been slowing ever since, although the recovery has recovered around about half of the jobs that were lost in the Inland Empire. I mentioned at the outset that the Inland Empire was a relative bright spot in the state of California. Remember that in California, the number of jobs has fallen by over 9%. In the Inland Empire, the number of jobs as of today is still about 8% lower, which is better than the state performance. And there's still around about 124,000 jobs in the Inland Empire, 124,000 fewer jobs than there were prior to the pandemic. And again, it's the accommodation and food services and arts and entertainment sectors which have been hit hardest on a relative basis. So the Inland Empire has not been immune from many of these macro trends that we have observed. And again, as is the case with the national and the California economy, in the Inland Empire, the job losses have been disproportionately impacting lower income residents. So nearly 1 in 3, a third of the lower wage residents in the Inland Empire have lost their jobs since the period prior to the pandemic. That said, within the Inland Empire, the higher wage earners have outperformed both the California and the national economy. So again, we do have this sort of bifurcated recovery whereby job losses are really impacting some members of the community harder than others. A very similar picture here with respect to the recovery as we've seen at both the national and the California level after the snapback in the economy or in the labor market that we saw in May and June. We have seen a slowing of the recovery. So when you have 124,000 job deficit, I believe it was 121,000, but when you have over 120,000 jobs that have been lost in the Inland Empire, adding jobs at 3,000 a month isn't getting you to where you want to go very quickly. So we need to see the recovery gather steam again. We want to be adding jobs in the tens of the thousands rather than sort of the low thousands for this recovery to get back on track. As you can see, the extent of the damage in April alone, nearly 200,000 jobs were lost in the Inland Empire. With respect to sort of consumer activity, unfortunately, these data only go up to Q2. This is sort of analyzing taxable sales. And we saw taxable sales fall off a cliff in the Inland Empire, as we did throughout the nation and throughout the state. And, you can look down here to see which sectors were impacted the hardest in the second quarter. So people aren't driving anymore. So fuel and service stations have seen the biggest loss in consumption, closely followed by restaurants and hotels, which is our leisure and hospitality sector of the economy. Now, of course, this has implications for local budgets, public budgets. You cannot lose this amount of sales tax revenue and it not have repercussions. And throughout the state, we have seen early retirements and cuts in certain services from the state level all the way down to the local level of the economy. So that damage that has been sustained locally will take some time to repair with respect to local balance sheets. The data I just showed you only went up to Q2. This is tracking consumption over extended period of time, coming all the way up to November the 1st. So you can see that sort of following Q2 throughout the summer, as we went into so Q2 ended in June. We did see a big snapback in spending in the Inland Empire through the summer, but again, we are tethered to the coronavirus, whether we like it or not. As cases have ticked up again, we have seen consumption in the Inland Empire shrink. As well, home buying, as with California, as with the national level, we have seen a pretty impressive snapback in the housing market. So this demonstrates Inland Empire home sales. Again, we see a contraction, a snapback. Perhaps the brightest spot of the economy right now is the performance of the housing market. And just going to take a few minutes here to finish up by talking about the communities of the Southwest Riverside County. As I mentioned at the outset, we don't have as timely data as we would like the further we drill down into the economy. So the numbers that I'm showing you here represent the economy prior to the pandemic. But what we can do and why a lot of the discussion about what had happened in the US and the California economy and in the Inland Empire was relevant to this discussion is because we can make inferences based on this macro picture about how the Southwest communities have been performing. So, for example, if we look at Lake Elsinore, what we see here is accommodation of food services makes up a smaller share of employment in Lake Elsinore than it does in the Riverside County economy. What we also see, and so why is that significant? It's significant because this was a sector which was hit the hardest. So if you're an economy which has a lighter share or smaller share of a sector which has been performing been performing poorly, you can make inferences about how the economy has been recovering and how it's been faring. So the fact that Lake Elsinore has both a smaller share of accommodation and food services and of arts and entertainment employment with respect to Riverside County means that Lake Elsinore has probably fared a little bit better than Riverside County has fared, which has fared better than the state of California has fared. We see a similar picture with respect to Menifee as well. So with respect to Menifee, again, we see a smaller share. Only accommodation and food services make up 2% of the labor force compared to 2.4% for the county of Riverside. And again, remember that one of the reasons that the county of Riverside was performing better was because it didn't have such a concentration in these sort of tourism-based sectors as we might have seen for the broader state of California. And again, Menifee has a slightly smaller share, not a much smaller share of employment in arts and entertainment. But again, the fact that it has a smaller share of jobs in the sectors which have been hit the hardest is somewhat, I don't want to say the word bullish, but it's somewhat encouraging for the performance of the city of Menifee. The city of Marietta, the I think the big takeaway from the city compared to what we might have seen in Riverside County is the respect to which it has a much more educated workforce than we see in Riverside County. So the share of people with a bachelor's degree is higher in Murrieta than it is in Riverside County, as is the share of people who hold a graduate degree. Remember from the slides that the workers who have been performing the best during the downturn are the higher income workers, and the more educated, or the higher somebody's level of formal education, the higher their wages are. So places like Murrieta, which have a concentration of relatively higher income workers, we can infer from this that the labor force in Murrieta has been less affected than has been in the case in Riverside County, which again has been slightly less affected than has been in the case in the California economy. And the same would be true in Temecula as well. Again, Temecula is home to a relatively higher income labor force than is the case for Riverside County. And this is something which is going to stand City of Temecula and the residents of the City of Temecula in good stead. Their disproportionate share of higher educated workers. From this, we can infer, again, because this segment of the economy has been less affected, that the residents of the City of Temecula will have been less affected than the average resident in Riverside County, which again has been performing better than has been the case for the state of California economy. Wildomar, does slightly less on the sort of educational side of things. So perhaps a slight red flag for Wildomar would be that it has a lower share of bachelor and graduate residents and a slightly higher share of people holding a high school diploma. But again, if you were to look at these sectors of the economy, it does have a smaller share of workers in accommodation and food services than is the case in Riverside County. And this is certainly true in the arts and entertainment sector as well, where we see a smaller share of workers in what has been the most affected sector from the sort of national and state and even county of Riverside perspective. With respect to taxable sales, again, unfortunately, these data points end in Q2. We have seen a contraction in taxable sales activity, as we would imagine, as people lose jobs, as consumer activity is constrained by a lot of the procedures which have been put in place to contain the coronavirus. We have seen an impact on sales activity, although some cities have performed better than others. So despite the constraints that are in place, Lake Elsinore actually saw a growth in its taxable sales on a year-over-year basis, although Temecula has been hit especially hard, and perhaps that's not surprising given some of the accommodation and food services offerings that exist in Temecula. Finally, as is the case nationally and with respect to California, we have seen pretty strong performance in home sales in many communities. Unfortunately, we don't have data for every city in the Southwest region here, but you can see that on a year-over-year basis, home sales in Murrieta were up 20%. They were up 16% in Temecula, which outperforms many of the neighboring communities in the region. Okay, so just finally to wrap things up here, like I said, this is ultimately the COVID-19 economy. All the economic fallout that we have seen has been due to the outbreak of a global pandemic rather than some structural imbalance in the economy. And there's no way to sugarcoat it. It looks like we're in for a bleak winter. Every day, as we see the number of cases tick up and as we see the number of restrictions on consumer activity in response to the growing spread of the coronavirus, this is a headwind for the economy. But ultimately, the COVID-19 economy has been an economy of winners and losers. This has been an economy which has disproportionately affected lower income workers and also workers of color. You know, in the sort of short term, significant damage has been sustained to the labor market. As I mentioned, we cannot expect a full recovery of the labor market until 2023 for us to return to that trend we were on prior to the pandemics. One of the big fallouts, as I've alluded to in this talk, has been the impact of the recession on public budgets. When we see consumer activity constrained, this does translate into taxable sales activity, which of course is going to have a big impact on local public budgets. And I think the big wild card is the extent to which Congress is act. And I think at the very least, we would like to see some assistance for lower income workers and those workers who have been disproportionately affected by the fallout. But, business owners, as has been mentioned by previous speakers, there have been a number of business closures and businesses have really been struggling as a result of the restrictions. So some assistance is required in order to secure the stability of small businesses throughout the state and throughout the region. I would say that as we go into 2021, the second half of 2021 starts to look positive. Again, I'm not an epidemiologist, but when I listen to epidemiologists, they say that this winter will be the worst of the pandemic. Treatments do get better all the time, and there's now quite significant expectation that a vaccine will be released towards the end of this year, although it will take some time for that vaccine to reach the number of people we might like it to. But that the expectation is that by the middle of next year, we should be able to proceed in such a way that many millions of people have received the vaccine. And once we get to that point, we would expect to see really big surge in growth in both the leisure and hospitality sectors and the arts and entertainment sectors. Those sectors which have been most disproportionately impacted by the economic fallout should be the sectors which see the strongest growth in 2021. And the sort of positive story with respect to the housing market that we've seen throughout 2020 will continue into 2021, because again, there hasn't been sort of fundamental or structural damage to the economy that we have seen in previous recessions. So the second that we can stop the spread of the virus, we would expect some element of normalcy to return. I apologize. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I look forward to answering any questions that people may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Osman, for the great and very easily to understand information. So you did a great job. Thank you. So yes, we have a few minutes for question and answers. So let me jump right in. So the governor came on TV yesterday and kind of gave a warning, if you will, saying he's going to pull the blueprint plan, and they need to make a drastic halt to this emergency. So the question is, if we were to shut down again, go back to stay-at-home orders for a couple of weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, what do you predict what will happen to the economy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to imagine how it is a tailwind for the economy. I don't think that we're going to return quite to where we were in April with respect to everybody sort of holed up in their home for weeks upon end. But it's very clear that some of the momentum that we were seeing in California, and we have to remember California was hit really hard by the virus in the summertime. It took some time for that to unravel, and just as we might have hoped that we were in for a sort of a joyous holiday period, that we could all start spending and resuming normal activity, it seems like the rug has been pulled out from underneath us. So yeah, I cannot sit here and say that if we add more restrictions, it's going to be bullish for the economy. It is going to affect consumer activity. It is going to affect our ability to engage in our normal activity. And that is not a commentary on me as to with respect to whether the governor should be taking these actions or not, because that is clearly a public health action. And I'm not an epidemiologist. Just from the perspective of the economy, it is certainly going to create a drag on the recovery.
Thank you. Okay, so do we know how other comparable global markets are recovering?
Well, that's a good question. So we seem to have a somewhat sort of bifurcated spread of the virus throughout the world. I think when the closest analogy for the US is what is happening in Europe. We're seeing surging cases in Europe, and we have seen pretty draconian, dramatic shutdowns of the economy, or the economies have been shut down to a very large extent over there. So if we were to look at Europe, who seem to be a good few weeks ahead of us with respect to the pandemic, I don't think there's a lot of optimism that could be yielded there. That said, many Asian economies have been able to control the virus to a much greater extent than we have in the US, and their economies have rebounded much better. So again, we come back to this idea here that the virus is everything. We, you know, like it or not, that the virus really is shaping our ability to engage in normal activity, which ultimately affects consumer behavior, and consumer behavior affects the livelihood of small businesses and large businesses as well. So we do see some encouraging signs from Asia, less encouraging signs from Europe.
Got it. Okay, so this is a question on wages. So do the labor and unemployment trends you have shared have any connection to whether wages will increase or decrease or remain the same?
That's a great question. So what data we have seen is that wages have actually ticked up a little bit. So despite the job losses, wages have been a little bit stronger. But one of the reasons for that is not encouraging. If you lose a lot of sort of lower paying jobs, that means the average of the remaining people, average wages for the remainder of the labor force is going to tick up a little bit. From a sort of economic theory perspective, you know, when the unemployment rate is higher, that normally acts as a drag on wage growth. The more choice that employers have with respect to adding workers normally suppresses wage growth. I would say, though, that I don't think that we would see a big change in one direction or another. Again, if we can get back to some level of normalcy come the second quarter of next year, the third quarter of next year, I think wages would pretty much pick up trend. Prior to the pandemic, wages were increasing because we had a tight labor market. And as labor markets start to tighten again, we would expect to see sort of some healthy wage growth, although that's probably not going to happen until at least the back end of 2021.
Mm-hmm. Would you define this as a recession? I know that word is thrown out
sure.
quite often. Are we technically in a recession, or are we just in a funk?
So I would like to be the person that makes a decision as to whether we have recessions or not, but I'm not. I don't hold that much power. The federal government calls recessions, and a recession is technically defined as a contraction of economic activity in 2 consecutive quarters. So we did have a technical recession because our economy contracted in Q1, it contracted in Q2. So we had an economic recession, but we are out of the recession at this point. The recovery that we saw in Q3 ended the recession. So to use your language, perhaps this can be seen as a funk now rather than being in the middle of the recession, because technically the recession is over right now.
Got it. And I know us as a city, we are constantly asked this question as well. Someone is asking, how much weight is given in economic factors in state or Riverside County decisions on restrictions, or is it medical proactive measures that predominate?
Yeah, and I think that when you look around the US, different states have weighed these factors differently. So I think that you see some states where they've made the decision that perhaps, for lack of a better term, they want to put a little bit more faith in their residents and say, okay, we want to trust you residents to do the right thing, to not gather in large numbers and to wear face masks, because if we can do those things, we can sustain some level of economic activity. So some states' economies have performed better than California. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And one of the reasons for California's underperformance has been the restrictions. So I think that in California, you would say that the emphasis has been more on public health than perhaps in other states where perhaps the economy has been front and center of decisions. And I think that translates into the federal level as well. We had 2 candidates competing who had completely different views on how to sort of contain the virus from a public health perspective, with one view, I think, perhaps more focused on the recovery of the economy, and another view perhaps more focused on sort of the public health aspect. So that is the that is the balance that we're weighing here, is how to weigh up the public health considerations with the damage that could be sustained to the economy in the meantime.
Awesome. We have lots of people asking for your slides. So your PowerPoint slides. So
yep, I'd be delighted to share them.
And so we will get those out. We'll have the chamber post your slides on social for everyone. One more question before we wrap up. Let's see. What are your thoughts on the herd immunity strategy? It seems to have worked well for others, like Switzerland.
Yeah, I really, I struggle to make sense of the economy at times. So I'll leave those questions for the epidemiologist, because I really, I cannot speak intelligently about herd immunity. So I think I'll leave that for public health officials, and I'll stick to the economy.
Yes, I agree with you. Well, thank you, Dr. Osman. Your presentation was very valuable. So thank you for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure.
This concludes our program. Thank you all again for everyone, and for our sponsors for making this event possible. A reminder, this entire presentation is recorded and will be on the Chamber's website. And we know that a lot of you were asking for UCR's slides. And so we'll get the slides up to you as well. And we appreciate you, and have a great day. Bye, everyone.